Again, recently I came across an idea put forward by, I'm not sure who put forward it first actually, but the idea was that religion is potentially some sort of a byproduct of our mental evolution, or our sociological evolution perhaps, or psychological evolution. And it went something like this, which might explain sort of why it is that we generally, when I say we as human beings, traditionally every society throughout the world really has done something along these lines, called religion. Why it is that we put so much attention on subjective ideas. And the idea went something like this: that when we're babies, when we're just born, and shortly thereafter, we have a very a dualistic way of experiencing the world. In other words, an us and them, or us and everything else experience. Babies, after all, are very empirical. In other words, they experience the world very viscerally and very much. They could have a sense, we can imagine anyways, and those who have studied, I guess, in some way can sort of discern this, that a baby can notice that when it grabs its other hand or moves its hand, you can even see, if you look at a baby and you observe them, they can actually, sometimes they'll be looking at their hand moving, and they can realize that they probably realize it from an experiential, empirical sense, that is them individually. That's a part of them, really. But the bar on the crib, they might grab it. They can sense that's a little bit different. That doesn't move because they think so. But even more so, even more important than that, are the people, the duality of sort of higher and lower dependencies. The baby knows that there's somebody else out there that provides for it, because we can see that the baby will cry, and that equals mother's milk or some sort of a response, right? So there's this experience we can imagine in the subconscious of that baby, because they're not, I don't know if they're fully conscious very early on, but subconscious at least, that there's the experience of self, individual self, and there's the experience of an other. That's kind of a duality. And it's not just an experience of duality of equals. There's a superior other, in a way. Kind of like, to the baby, you might think of it as kind of like a god to the baby. Because the baby must perform something. It's like, and if we think of it in terms of religion, the idea is acts of supplication or incantations or something like this, sacrifices to the gods, which will then get the gods' favor. Well, the child must do something like cry out or act out in some way, and therefore then comes God, usually in the form of mom with milk or food or fresh diaper or something like this. They learn quite rapidly that it's possible to usher in the salvation in that moment of Mother God. And so it's not, and if we know that, if we know from study that the formative years, the younger the child is, the greater impact the environment, the nurture of the environment has on the subconscious of that individual. So when they grow up, there's not the outgrowing of this concept. So therefore the experience of duality can still exist, and there's this us and them, and there's also authority. Coming with this godly character of mom is also an authority figure. And the child quickly learns that in order to get favor, in order to get the necessities of life, from mom or dad, whoever's the caregiver, there's also reciprocation on the part of the baby's, of the child, as he or she starts to become conscious, to perform in a certain way, to obey certain rules, house rules, and so on. Otherwise, there's scorning from God, mother, dad, or there is some sort of a repercussion. So, so this is what we train our kids for, right? Is to listen to authority and to have that us and them mentality. We do it unconsciously as parents, but if we think about it from the child's perspective, just imagine ourselves for a moment from that perspective, we get to understand why it is that we grow up. And religion, certainly, we could probably imagine that God's aspects of God, concept of God, can grow out of this. Religion can grow out of this. Because, after all, if most people are raised with an experience of a higher power, which is very real in the case of mom and dad, who not only provide, but are also to be honored and obeyed. That is very much along the lines of what most people see in religion as God. As loving too, right? That's the concept of mom and dad. Loving, but yet to be obeyed and to provide for. Basically, we live by the grace of our godly parents. And you can see that how religion would come out of this. I mean, that's the concept of God can come from that, in this sort of theory anyways. And also the religion can grow out of that because you have a priestly class which takes advantage, as any shyster salesman would do, to then create some sort of rituals around a godly character for adults who are still, psychologically children, still in this mindset of duality, us, me, and God, higher power, God. And because it's on the subconscious level, this concept, because when this was inculcated into us, or brought into us, or we took this on, we were not, in the early moments, I wouldn't say fully conscious of it, because a newborn baby is not fully conscious as we are. Subconscious, yes. Like a sponge, yes. But not. So therefore, we don't remember it, but it's there deep. And if a priestly class member, well educated in this knowledge, can foist upon us a concept that is subjective rather than objective like our mom and dads were, the subconscious won't notice the difference if it's well cleverly done, because the subjective can be seen as objective in the subconscious experience. And therefore, we can be duped into all sorts of strange ideas in religions, and in, of course, government is an offshoot of religion. It's the same thing. And the priestly class, it becomes, or the politician takes over from where the priestly class left off, as liars, shakedown artists, and manipulators that they are, to bring us into another godly character, which is the state, right? Especially the welfare state. If you think about it, that's that the government is seen as higher than us, than the citizen. The government has the necessities for those in need, and there's all kinds of rules that have to be followed by the authority. There's the enforcement in the family for the child. It may have been a raised hand, yelling voice, or whatever. In the religion of statism, it's the cops with, ankle chains, guns, and jailhouses, and a myriad of rules to follow. It's the same as they're just house rules on a larger scale. But it's easy to see how, I think it's easy to see how this theory could well be the case, because, I mean, take for example the Jesuits. I think it was Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, who once said that, "Give me a child till 7, and I'll give you the man." This has been known for a very long time, that if whatever we teach our kids early on, and it's not only what we teach them, just the experience that the child is having. The experience that the child is having is a dualistic world in a way. They can see themselves, sort of thing, and there's also this higher power that gives them all their food, their clothing, changes their diaper, comforts them when they feel sick, and this sort of thing, gives them clothing and warmth and hugs and all that sort of thing. There's this, their whole world is dependent upon this benevolent, godlike character called mom and dad, or whoever's the caregiver. And it's easy to see how this could morph into something that comes along in adulthood. How does this improve the quality of our lives? Well, I think by just understanding that this could possibly be the case, understanding how it is that the way we are today is the cumulative effect of how we've been and what we've learned, then this is greatly plausible that how we come up with these things is environmental, and we take them on. However, we can become gradually, I would say, based on especially reason and evidence and so on, we can become more, rather than so much dualistic, but unity-minded in a way, because we can understand that there is no, if we study a little bit of science, we understand that on the atomic level, where there is no separation. There is no separation between me and this camera. There is substance between, and there's no absolute void. Same goes for between anybody else and the whole planet. I'm standing on the floor, and the floor is on the ground, and so on. There's this continuous connection, and what we do in groups of others affects others, and what they do affects us. So there's constant flux of connection. And rather than having this disconnection, that was a concept, or an experience, and almost like is an example of an empirical experience, which in reality is kind of false in the big picture. On the individual level, yeah, it's true, because we're having this experience here, and there's somebody that looks like over there. That is truth and experience. But on a deeper reality, it's not really so. I think this is important because, well, being aware of how we get ourselves into things can help us to get ourselves out, or point us in the direction of a greater sense of truth. What is more true? The religion is not necessarily true. It may have been just a sales pitch put on that everybody else fell for in the society, because way back when some very successful salesman pitched them on this idea so that they could control them, and it eventually morphed into all kinds of different rituals, which, I mean, creates community and so on. It does that, but it's not like it's necessarily true. It's kind of a byproduct of the way that we and society and so on evolved as it is. And we don't have to throw the whole thing out. There's value in it. Take the value, examine it, learn from it. There's a lot of jewels in our history, for sure. But if we don't examine it and see it for what it is, well, I don't really know what value it has then. So, just some thoughts anyways on one possible origin of religion, and how that origin can be really a trap, because religion, mythology, and all these sorts of things, they spill over into everything else. I mean, all of a sudden we're calling something government, but in reality it's the same thing. It's belief in something that a bunch of people made up. And it's a belief in it like it's as real as the rocks and the stones on the ground, you know. And it's not. We all know that because it only exists because the minds of men and women exists. And as soon as we say we're done with this, then it just becomes history like the ancient Egyptians or whatever, and then we're on to something else. But that is not so with the objective world, the mountains and so on. Whether we change our mind about something or not, they're still standing there. Governments, religions, and so on are not. They're just things we hold together by our individual and collective thoughts, I would say. And they're fortified by the way we began life, which is seeing things as us and higher power, I would say. It's a theory. What do you think? It might begin to explain part of the reason why we are so resistant to question authority. Because early on, number one, we couldn't question it. And B, if the higher authority didn't like what we were doing, they could, and in many cases did, punish us. That is still deep, can be still deep down inside of us, and prompting us to be always watchful and nervous of what we call authority. We don't have to be, we can at least question it. And the more we question it, eventually there has to be answers and recognition that authority is only what we give it. Hope this was interesting. My name is Steve. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye for now.